But let me just ask you an important question. Alan Dershowitz was on Breitbart News Tonight on Thursday, and he was talking about exactly that Pennsylvania case you mentioned. And he said he thinks the Republicans actually have a very solid argument, one that would be persuasive at the Supreme Court. The only problem is, are there enough ballots that came in late to make a difference? If there were, let's say, 10,000 ballots, but the difference between the two candidates is 50,000 ballots, then the Supreme Court might not take it up at all. They might say, well, there's nothing to be done here because even if we were to give all of those ballots to the president, he would not catch Joe Biden. So Dershowitz said they're going to have to combine that with some other cases that bring the total number of ballots in question up to the point where the result in the state would hang in the balance.
Well, that's right. My understanding is those late arriving ballots would not be enough to change the outcome of the election, even if they were all switched over to President Trump. In some ways, that may make it a more attractive case for the Supreme Court to take up because, unfortunately, in many instances, courts are very hesitant to weigh into the election process, particularly when it would change the outcome of an election. But this is certainly an important issue that, we need to look at that deserves a hearing from the high court, and really would help remind other officials who are not state legislators that it's not their job to change the election rules, especially close to the election, and especially, as happened this past year, even after some votes had already been cast.
Now, what about this question about votes being counted after Election Day, with the whole country basically going to bed on election night thinking that the president was way ahead in Michigan and Pennsylvania? Suddenly, all of these mail-in ballots began to be counted. Would any of these Supreme Court cases affect that? In other words, would they say, you have to freeze this in time on election night? If the president's ahead in these states, he wins in these states. Would any of the cases result in that kind of a ruling?
Well, that would certainly be an uphill battle to get the Supreme Court to make that type of ruling, especially where we stand now in terms of timing. But I think the issues that we saw on Election Day really highlight two problems. The first is, again, that our election procedures were really changed too close to the election by officials who didn't necessarily have the authority to do that. And so we saw in places like Pennsylvania, which hasn't traditionally had a large vote-by-mail contingent, that they were basically overwhelmed with the mail-in ballots this election. And so it was taking them a long time to process the mail-in ballots. There were issues surrounding, how that tabulation process would take place, who could observe it. And so it really undermines confidence in the electoral process whenever we see those types of issues. And the second area it highlights is that, absentee ballots traditionally, again, haven't been used to any significant degree in a lot of these states. And so whenever you're using absentee ballots, because they are traditionally a less secure, less reliable way of voting than in-person voting, it's really important to have all of the other safeguards in place so that we can have confidence in the integrity and the outcome of our elections. And so I think, there were certainly areas, we saw problem areas, just like you were mentioning, on election night this year. And so as we prepare and move forward to 2022 and 2024, we certainly need to address those problems. And if states are going to continue to push vote by mail to any large degree, then they also need to take steps to, make sure their voter rolls are accurate and up to date, work to make sure, there are photo ID requirements for vote by mail, just like in-person voting, and that other basic safeguards like signature matches are in place, and that, poll watchers, the people who tabulate the votes, are able to efficiently and effectively make use of those tools.